As it goes, normally we need to take some precautionary steps when we are performing our experiments. So the precautions actually is referred to the action that can be taken by the student in order to minimize the effect on the data recorded or the result of the experiment. So most of the time, for all experiments, we have one of these precautions whereby we try to avoid the parallax error by placing the eye such that the line of view is perpendicular to the scale of the instruments. Then there are some common precautions depends on the situation in a particular experiment. For example, we might switch off the fan in the lab so that the wind will not affect the result. Ensure that the pointer has stopped moving before taking the length of the measurements. Do not apply any push force, the external force, upon releasing the ball bearing along the curved railing. 4. Lock is used to ensure the timber does not rotate while taking the reading using a micrometer screw gauge. 5th, all connections of wire and other devices must be tied to avoid quivering of needle pointer for ammeter and voltmeter when we perform experiment which is deal with electric. Then we might have some sources of error for our experiment which will affect the accuracy of our experimental result. So most of the time, this source of error is caused by two factors, the given apparatus and the instruments we use for that particular experiment and the experiment step or the procedure. So the limit of both might prevent more accurate measurements of data that affect the final result of the experiment. So normally in our discussion of report writing, we need to put down or identify the source of error that affect the result of our experiment. So basically, all the source of error can be divided or categorized into two, whereby we might have systematic error and random error. Systematic error is referred to the error when the measurement's value is always either larger than or smaller than the true value. The example of systematic error is the zero error, whereby the instrument has reading even when nothing is being measured. Or we have incorrect calibration or poor conditions of the instruments we use. For example, a stopwatch which is fast due to a poor calibrations or overuse. So, in order to improve the source of error, for example, for zero error, we might note down the zero error of a device and taken into account in data recording. Then for the incorrect or poor condition of stopwatch, maybe we can check the time measure by using another stopwatch. Then second categories of error is what we call random error, whereby the measure value are both larger or smaller than the true value in a random fashion. So example of source of error which is considered as random error is the human reaction time error, not suitable technique in setup of the instruments. For example, inconsistent pressure is applied while closing the gate of a micrometer screw gauge. The parallax error in reading due to the wrong positions of eye when reading a scale, and the surrounding factors such as the temperature and the wind blow that might affect the reading that we recorded. So ways to improve this kind of error is taking several readings means that we are going to perform repeated readings and we calculate the mean or the average value. So after identified possible source of error, it is critical to write down which measurements this source of error affect in our discussion lab report. So this is one of the example of poor source of error statement. The wooden ramp has an uneven surface. So what happened? And this is an example of good source of error statements. So the wooden ramp has an uneven surface, so it may slow down the wooden roller at different parts of the ramp. This affects the accuracy of time measure T. So class, under the discussion part in your report writing, for each source of error you must contain two parts. First part is the description of the error, followed by the second part which you must explain how the described error might affect the accuracy of one or more results of the experiment. So bear in mind, when we write down the source of error in our report writing, we must be specific. Avoid using vague answers such as better equipment, parallax error, random error. So random error in measuring what? Parallax error happen at where? What better equipment you are referring to? So your statement should show how they affect any measurements. Then second one, don't invent any problems. So avoid inventing problems such as I have a damaged ruler, table was shaking when I do the experiment, human or personal error, for example, carelessness, poor technique, wrongly read the number on the timer. So this one shouldn't consider as source of error. So bear in mind, gross personal error, mistake or blunder should be avoided and corrected if discovered. So as a rule, blunder are excluded from the source of error discussion because it is generally assumed that the experiment result was obtained by carefully following the correct procedure given in the lab manual. Then do not restate precautions that you have taken in the experiment as source of error. What does this mean if you talk about the same thing in your precautionary step and the source of error? It means you are ignorant. You know you shouldn't do that particular thing, but you still purposely go and commit the error. So, for example, in your precautions, you write down, while reading the scale, must be placed vertically above the scale. Error, you say you have parallax error, the eye not perpendicular to the scale. So it will showing us that you still having the parallax error even though you already take it as precautionary step. So remember, there will be no redundancy for precautions and experimental error. So how to overcome the error or improve the error? So this one you have to put it down under the discussion of your report writing. So basically for systematic error, we can only solve by improving the setup or the executions of our experiment. For random error, we can solve it by repeating the experiment for many times to obtain average value. So same goes for the writing of ways to overcome the errors. Avoid vague terms like make sure, be careful for your ways to improve the experiment. And then also avoid redundancy. For example, you say the error is fan is switched on. Then ways to overcome, switch off the fan. So describe clearly the action and the change that you need to work on. Okay, for example, I give you an example of 4 improvement ways to overcome stagnant. Make sure eye is perpendicular to the scale. So how you are going to make sure your eye is always perpendicular to the scale? So you have to be specific. So this is the example of the good statement for improvement or ways to overcome. Use another ruler to point at the ruler and always in parallel to the meter rules reading scale. So this is a very specific way whereby we can ensure that our eye is perpendicular to the scale. So you can take this one as the guideline when you want to write down the precautionary step, the source of error, and also the ways to improve or overcome in your discussion in report writing. So this is the task for you as the preparation for next week experiment. You are going to prepare the first half of your report writing for experiment 1, whereby you are going to write down the title, the objective, the theory, the list of apparatus, the procedure, change it to passive sentence, and then construct 4 observation table. You can refer to the table 1.1 given in the lab manual for experiment 1. Okay, then we are going to perform the experiment 1 next week.